Hey friends, 2 months ago was my last video going over the Facebook message records between Nick and his side chicks. And now that I'm almost done traveling, got a little time, got the FOIA document copies, I thought it would be a good time to finish up on those. Where we last left off, Nick and Caitlin were talking, and Nick was letting Caitlin know that he has feelings for her still, even though he's with Gypsy Rose. This is February 2014. And Caitlin asked him if he has feelings for her more than even Jackie. And he says, yes, even Jackie when she tries to come back. But I said, hell no, I can't do it to you. But do you know why that is? Okay, so I will put up a link in the corner for anyone who hasn't seen the previous video, and we will start here. Nick says to Caitlin, at least you are thinking before you answer. I appreciate you are as long as you answer my question. And Caitlin says, I can't find enough words to answer your question. All the reasons I can think of are flooding in all at once. Nick says, well, besides all the bad you have put me through, think of all the good you have always given me too. Think about all the memories and you'll understand I see you unique. That is why I have always sticked by my word. When I said you was always the most beautiful ex out of all of them, it is true. You still are, even if you say you are over 200 pounds, because at least you are losing weight and putting an effort into losing it. So, if anything, I should be proud of you, and I am. But I treasure our moments we have together more than I ever could with anyone else I was with ever. And that is a lot I have to say with just this in one paragraph, and it is all true. Caitlin says, damn it, I'm trying to mind my P's and Q's. Nick says, you might be, but I told you the truth, as I always have. You know how I feel, and it is obvious I know how you feel. You told me yesterday you will never disappear again. You say it is a last straw deal now. I understand why, because you know I don't want to take any more disappearances after the last one. And yes, you are right. I don't, but remember one thing, I never gave up on you, even when everyone else did. Because of that, I suppose that is why you should feel as close to me as I know you do. Caitlin says, reason I said that is a specific song keeps coming to mind when we talk. Nick says, yes, but what I said is deep and truthful. Caitlin says, I know, I'm not saying it, Nicholas. That two-letter word starting with W isn't being used. Two-letter word. A we? Is that what she's talking about? I don't know. Sorry, friends. Back to the reading. Nick says, come on, Caitlin. Tell me. I know I used to have to coax you into letting things out in the past, since it seems I have the same bond we have had the entire time we have known each other. Still, I will say, come on, Caitlin. Tell me. Wink face. Nick says, come on, hun. Tell me. Caitlin says, we know. Nick says, from? Caitlin says, stop. Nick says, Caitlin, come on, tell me who it is from. Caitlin says, what? Nick says, who is the song from? Caitlin says, that wasn't the song. The song is Mine Would Be You by Blake Shelton. Nick says, I still coax you into telling me it. See, Caitlin, I still have that bond with you. Caitlin says, Nick, it's basically how I feel. Nick says, yes, but I just proved to you that we have that bond still. And yes, it's fine if it is how you feel. I might as well listen to it once. Then, well, it's obvious how things go from there based on how I react to it, even though I proved that we still have that bond. Caitlin says, it's slow. Nick says, I know that. Already I am listening to it. Caitlin says, already? Nick says, hee hee, silly, did you forget the old me or something when I used to coax you into letting things out? I used to always say, watch the video if it was one. It is still the same me. Caitlin says, yeah, but now you know how I feel partially. Nick says, you said it was the basic way, mainly feel, Caitlin. Now, partially, you made that sound like you try to hold back, but struggle to do so. Caitlin says, damn it. It takes almost every song that I listen to describe how I feel about you, but mainly this one. Nick says, Caitlin, was I being optimistic yesterday? Because let's try to be that way. Yes, I know we are supposed to be like friends, but by how our bond is described, we can be. We can be all in one since we are quite capable of it. How about this? So I can feel comfortable with you being around, and hopefully you feel the same. How about we let it be all the ways, but the lover part until we either have a chance or it seems right in a moment for it to be that way? So that means you would agree to yes on being friends, best friends, brother, sister, since we don't like hiding things from each other, anyways. And if you are truly serious about never disappearing again, we be also BFFs until a time was right for us to ever be that lover way again. I feel like we are at least using almost all the ways of our bond except the most intimate parts. I mean, yes, we can still talk about sex, but just in a BFFs way. So what do you say? Caitlin says, okay. Nick says, Caitlin, I need a more serious answer to this. If you are serious about staying around, it is a yes to always except that one until the right time, or what? I need a more serious answer since this should mean as much to you as it does to me. Caitlin says, I'm kind of tipsy, so don't take things the wrong way. Caitlin says, yes. Nick says, Caitlin, all I need from you is a yes if you are serious about it, are you? See, someone you knew that is all I asked for before even I asked it. Nick says, that is our bond, I tell you, and I know you treasure it probably as much as me, possibly even more than me, and I wouldn't even know it. Caitlin says, I said yes, yes. Nick says, I know you said it even before I asked for it, and I thank you for saying it since it was that was a more serious answer now that we got that out of the way. Was I on to something when I was saying how much you treasure our bond? Nick says, I mean, I wouldn't be surprised if I was right about that. Do you treasure it maybe as much as me, or possibly more, and I wouldn't even know it? Caitlin says, possibly more so. Ugh, damn liquor. Nick says, well, they say it makes people tell the truth. That has been proven multiple times. However, you wouldn't even need that just to tell me, since I am thankful you trust me, since I deserved it the entire time we have known each other. Caitlin says, don't be surprised if I may say something that may catch you off guard then. Nick says, Caitlin, you can't catch me off guard because the way we are towards each other makes it hard for me not to be taken by surprise. Tongue face. Caitlin says, LOL, I love you, handsome. Nick says, wow, I knew that was coming, but yeah, I must say, yes, yes, we have always loved each other. Besides, I guess that is why it's easy to play with you. Hee hee, tongue face. Miss Laughly Lot, tongue face, LOL. Caitlin says, I've been fighting myself to trying to avoid saying that and many other things. Nick says, well, I know you have, Caitlin. I have to ask you a question. It's scary how much we remember about each other, how no matter how much time has passed. Caitlin says, it feels natural to me. I'm gonna regret saying that later. Nick says, no, you aren't going to regret saying that. Besides, you said you have been trying to hold back so many things and having trouble holding all of them back. You said two of them. Why not get them all out of the way, hun? Caitlin says, love this song. Sail AWOL Nation. Nick says, please, Caitlin, please be willing to answer my question. I would appreciate it. Caitlin says, give me a minute. Got to clean the kitchen. Nick says, all right, well, I got to get going. It's going to get colder and colder out there, I suppose. And I don't want to go out there when it is nighttime, since that is when it will really be freezing. I just want to let you know that I appreciate the time we have had to talk. And thanks for opening up to me like the Caitlin I remember, since that does mean a lot to me that you did do that. And as I am blessed with trust from you, even though I have always gave you reason to keep it in me. If I seem like I am being a gentleman to you, I can't help it. I said I would be real. Please have a great night. And because I do care about talking to you every moment I can, I might not be on either this Friday or the coming Monday, most likely since I try to pick the warmest days of the week to come to the library. I just wanted you to know when I'll be on next. to hope to see you on then. And hopefully we can keep it like it's meaning, have the bond we have always had, but in the way we have discussed. However, just know that if the lover part comes into play in the future, and I feel like it is the right timing, I won't hold back on it. But, anyways, have a great night, beautiful Caitlin, and I hope to talk to you soon. And as I was to say this to you, like a brother saying to his little sister that he is close with, good night, sis. Heart. I just want to break in here and say so he was still going to the library early 2014. I remember reading messages between him and his dad, where his dad talked to him after the McDonald's incident and was saying, don't worry, you won't have to go use Wi Fi anywhere else. We've got you hooked up at home now. Okay, moving on, friends. Okay, Caitlin says, be safe and have a great night. I enjoyed talking to you as well. Well, I'll talk at you later. Good night, bro. It's weird to me how they're brothers and sisters until the lover thing feels right. Ugh. Anyway, Nick says, Caitlin, it seems we have to talk because I got your message and I am a little disturbed by it. So this is 2 days later. The be safe and good night was on the 5th, and now they're on February 7th. Still on the 7th, Nick says, Caitlin, all I will say is that you have no reason to not trust me. You have always given reason to trust me. However, it just sounds to me that you're confused inside and you need to sort that out before you do anything irrational. You say you are even more so in love with me than before. Why? Is it because I am being a gentleman to you? I actually could sense you were to change the night before we had a good conversation. Yes, the one where we said goodnight to each other by our full names. So, with that said, Caitlin, since I am not going to be on when you are, for I should probably get back home. For that, my heart is in a condition where I should rest a while. If I don't, I may put myself in a position where I might end up in the hospital due to a constant pain I feel in my chest. And it isn't from emotional distress. I believe it is from not giving my heart a chance to rest from walking so darn much. And I can't even drink a soda without it burning my heart tissue. So, with that, may end up taking a 1 week break from walking to the library, for it is probably wise to do so, just so I don't make the condition of my heart worse instead of giving it a chance to heal. Well, all I have to say is if you are feeling grossed out by our past, then you are becoming a cold person I don't want to associate myself with anymore, since the one I am with is building herself to be my ideal mate. For that is the situation with her, as I can sense her maturing over time. And a good maturing over time, maybe we will always have the bond we do. But what I said the day before yesterday is true. We can still use our bond in the ways I mentioned, but if you even attempt to push me away, I won't stand for it anymore. I have dealt with it in the past too many times to count. Since that is the situation, I suggest you don't attempt to push me away. If you do, you'll probably hate yourself for the rest of your life for doing it, mainly because the time you said, this is the last straw. You were sensing that I won't put up with anyone with any more after this. So you knew you were close to losing me permanently if you try to push me away again. Hopefully, you don't attempt it since it is nice to have you in my life again. But when I said I have one I have been looking for is the one I am with, I wasn't joking, Caitlin. So please be wise and don't attempt to push me away. Because if you are really staying, we will see based on your actions to come. And if you aren't, I will probably kick you out of my life permanently as a only warning to you if you attempt to push me away since my heart isn't in a condition to worry about others, and I have worried about for too long as it is. Okay, I got to break in here and say that is weird. I've never heard of Nick having a heart condition before. Have y'all friends? And if he doesn't have one, was he trying something he learned from Gypsy there? I don't mean to laugh at this, but what the hell? Ugh. Anyway, moving on. Caitlin says, hold on, cleaning house. Nick says, I already said what I had to, though, Caitlin. Caitlin says, I take it the other message didn't send. Nick says, it must not have because I didn't see anything except cleaning house. Caitlin says, I meant some people just go too far when it comes to posting stuff on Facebook. I'm not grossed out by our past except my own actions in the past. Nick says, I see. Well, like I said, I already said everything I had to, whether it was about trust or anything else. It was all said already in that long message because I have nothing more to say because it was all put out there already. Caitlin says, okay, well, I'm about to vacuum the living room. Go get some rest. TTYL. Nick says, I'll be on here for a while. I am trying to ready myself to walk home. I am far from ready for that. Caitlin says, ah. Nick says, yep, I pretty much know what is going on with my heart, so I'm let it rest before another 1.4 mile walk home. Caitlin says, well, take her easy then. Nick says, I have to take it easy. I could make it become severe, and if that happens, it won't heal complete for up to 6 weeks. Caitlin says, heart murmur or something? Nick says, it's just a muscle strain on the heart, which is common for people to experience. It is just that it had sense to me why it started to get worse. I have to stop walking everywhere, and it's true. I usually walk everywhere I go, so it keeps my heart probably on a constant stress level. That is why the pain in my heart is going on. Caitlin says, could also be the cold weather. Nick says, false. Oh, never mind. Cut that. Nick says, I know it isn't that. The laptop I am carrying is somewhat heavy. So every time I go to the library, that is putting extra strain on my circulation of blood through my body. You can see it makes it have to work probably 2 times harder, maybe even three, since I have to carry it by hand. And that, along with other things, I may have to keep the laptop cool and easier to use, makes it a heavier bag to carry. Caitlin says, yeah, makes sense. Nick says, exactly. So after Monday, I might not be on until the Monday after that one, since I plan on taking a 1 week break from walking longer distances. Caitlin says, ugh. Somehow I need to start getting some sleep. Hard to sleep without a little cuddle buddy, though. Sad face. Caitlin says, well, I can understand that. Nick says, "Aw, yeah, I suppose it is, and I may have to put your number in my phone for the time I am not online, because I suppose we could end up missing each other while I am not online, since I do expect it to happen." Caitlin says, "I've got AT&T." Nick says, "That's fine." Nick says, "Caitlin, that is, you're generally awake by the for sure time. I mean, that one day you didn't get on until it was like noon around you." Caitlin says, "I was sick that day. Give a girl a break." Nick says, "A girl? I don't see a girl. The last time I checked, I thought you were a woman. LOL. Tongue face." Caitlin says, LOL. Now don't go calling me ma'am. That's one way to piss me off. I'm not an old woman. Oh, I just got to break in here and say real quick. I saw someone, they didn't say anything, but get like an offended look towards me when I called them ma'am in Minneapolis. And for us who've grown up, in the South, saying ma'am doesn't have anything at all to do with age. Only thing it has to do with is how we were raised to treat people with respect. We say ma'am to little girls to get them used to the culture. Uh, so we're just thinking about ourselves and how we want to talk, how we feel it's nice to speak with respect. It doesn't have anything to do with age in the South. But anyway, I just had to throw that in there, friends. Okay, Caitlin says, oh, and Nick says, ma'am, seriously, Caitlin, the only reason I would say that is saying it to respect you. But then again, you're younger than me, so I don't see me calling you that anytime soon. So Nick's speaking of respect, but once again, you're younger than me. I wouldn't call you that. It seems like in the north it might be related to age, but down here it's just not. And the Ozarks isn't deep south, but it wasn't related to age in the Ozarks either. Not where I grew up anyway. Okay, anyway, Caitlin says, can't believe I'm almost 21. Fuck, switch those numbers around again. She wants to be 12. Ugh. Caitlin says, LOL, okay, sir. Wink face. Nick says, Caitlin, you're not 12, and 21 means I have an instinctive feeling you'll be drinking more heavily in the future. Caitlin says, LOL, maybe a bit. Tequila, anyone? Wink face, tongue face. Nick says, I definitely know you too well. And Caitlin says, LOL, okay. What will I not drink? Bet you won't guess. Nick says, wine. Caitlin says, nope. Wine coolers, Bud Light, Miller Light. I'm a strong believer in Budweiser. Smile. Nick says, K. Caitlin says, disturbing that I've already figured that out. Nick says, no. The fact that I am 24 and never bothered to drink speaks on how much longer I plan to live than it seems you do. Nick says, that's all that is disturbing to me. Caitlin says, LOL, I don't drink much. Nick says, maybe so, but I don't drink at all. I always said I might have some red wine. The interesting thing is, I still to this day haven't had any. Caitlin says, LOL, red wine is for candlelit dinner dates. Nick says, but it has also been proven to be a healthy drink. I just haven't touched it though, because because one, I feel is a waste of money, and two, I don't need to think about leading an unhealthy drinking style of life. Caitlin says, red wine is actually good for your heart. Nick says, I know that, Caitlin. That is why I said that. Nick says, tongue face. So you just said something I was already aware of. Caitlin says, well, I also smoke cigarettes. So yeah. Nick says, and I'm proud I don't. Caitlin says, same here. It's a hard habit to kick. Caitlin says, remember when I worked for McDonald's, how I could budget my money and still have over half my paycheck left 2 weeks later? Not anymore. Nick says, it may be hard to break, but only ones who are relentless on quitting smoking actually do it. But for me, I guess my lungs are in a lot better shape than a normal smoker. Since, well, I guess that is also why I can still be energetic as it is good. I pay attention to all the negative influences out there. Caitlin says, my lungs aren't too bad. Then again, a pack lasts me about 3 or 4 days, so sometimes longer if I don't share with my mom and cousin. Nick says, yes, but the only two reason why my lungs aren't perfect is secondhand smoking and the cold air outside. Otherwise, they are in proficient condition. Caitlin says, true, mine are scarred from pneumonia when I was a kid. Nick says, okay, so yeah, I'll have no trouble walking home. I just got to remember to breathe every few seconds, though, so that way I don't mess up my blood flow, which isn't hard to do. It's just a memory thing. Caitlin says, yep. Nick says, However, I can't drink soda, though. For some reason, it upsets my heart, though. So right now I'm drinking Gatorade. Caitlin says, oh, yum, lol. Nick says, it's better for me than soda. When I drink soda now, it actually gives me a burning effect on my heart. So when I drink Gatorade, it gives me a more cooling effect. It's weird, but that's what it seems like. Y'all, is he getting like acid reflux from drinking carbonation and he thinks his heart tissue's burning? I'm not sure what's happening here, or if he's learned a tactic. Caitlin says, soda still makes my back ache. Nick says, okay, but what it does to me used to never do to me. So, yeah, that is why I'll not be drinking the longest. I can hopefully this whole week that I am not on here, I won't drink any. Caitlin says, no kidding. Nick says, of course I am not kidding. The heart isn't something to mess with. That is something I know for sure that I won't take lightly. Caitlin says, well, that's a good thing. Nick says, Caitlin, that sounded like you don't remember. I have always been a wise person. And if anybody should know that about me that has known me for a while, it is you. God. Caitlin says, I didn't forget. Nick says, glad you didn't, because I was starting to wonder if you did for a moment there. Caitlin says, sorry, I'm just singing along to some tunes. Smile. Nick says, that doesn't surprise me. Tongue face. Caitlin says, little white church, little big town. Nick says, what else? LOL. Caitlin says, LOL, thrift shop. Nick says, okay. Caitlin says, LOL, the song. Caitlin says, $20 in my pocket. Nick says, okay. Nick says, yeah, I know what you were talking about. Just multitasking, as I'm sure you are too. Caitlin says, I do a lot of dirty dancing nowadays. Wink face. Nick says, yeah, true, but usually you need someone to do that with most of the time. Caitlin says, alone, of course. Nobody gets to see me dancing or singing. Nick says, I pretty much touched that. Caitlin says, LOL, too embarrassed to do it around anyone. Nick says, I doubt that. You did say at time you might even do it around me, but then again, those are past times. Caitlin says, if it ever happens. Nick says, but see, you remember saying it, see? Caitlin says, I remember a lot from then. Caitlin says, I'm going to invest in another push up bra when I get a job. Sorry, thinking out loud. Caitlin says, my hair is black and dark brown. Wink face. Nick says, that's fine. You used to think out loud all the time around me. Then again, it was due to the trust, and you noticed it didn't bother me. Caitlin says, thinking black and blue lace. Nick says, for shoes, hey, interesting. Caitlin says, LOL bra. Nick says, oh, okay, that would be interesting too. Caitlin says, dude, just look at me as your lesbian sister. LOL. Caitlin says, I still like titties, especially mine. Nick says, well, I doubt that only because I know you enough to see more than one thing in you that I can't see changing. And then you go into it about your own top. Then I shouldn't be surprised you are comfortable being that way towards me talking about that, but it's okay. I have no problem with it. Just please don't try to turn me on because what I said that one day was true. Nick says, yes, about the power you have over me. I won't remind you if you forgot just because, well, I shouldn't remind you is the way I see it. Caitlin says, it's probably because I'm forbidden territory. Nick says, no, not really, because of, well, our bond and my natural attraction to you. That is why. Nick says, it's not like I should say any more than that because, well, it is all true. Caitlin says, well, I doubt you could handle me nowadays. I'm gutter minded. Nick says, I probably could handle you, but that is only because I have been able to in the past. However, I'm not sure if you want to go there, sis. Caitlin says, LOL. Last time I checked, you seem to prefer medium tits, bro. Nick says, wow, you don't remember me well then, do you? Medium? I said anywhere, any size between C and D cup. Caitlin says, I'm DD. Nick says, you still have D in yours. It might be double, but that don't matter. I still could still handle you, sis. Tongue face. Tongue face. Caitlin says, LOL, sure, rolls eyes. Nick says, you know, it's true if I say it is, but then again, it seems I won't anytime soon to prove it. But wait a second, my word has always been on target. It says I can handle something. So, with that said, you can't deny when I say something even if it is about your own chest. Tongue face. Caitlin says, LOL, okay, I'm a bit self centered around my now nice ass curves, beautiful eyes, lips, nose, and tits. LOL. Nick says, don't get me going on about the rest of your body. Please don't, sis. LOL. Caitlin says, LOL, what? My short ass legs? LOL. Nick says, why do you have to remind me that I love that you are short? LOL. Tongue face. Caitlin says, did I mention I'm flexible? Nick says, Caitlin, quit it before you start to get my imagination going there, sis. LOL. Caitlin says, LOL, just tell me, quit hiding your thoughts, bro. Caitlin says, besides, I'm not short, I'm fun sized. Wink face. Nick says, hiding my thoughts? I knew you would try to take advantage of the truth of me being naturally attracted to you. You already got my imagination started just by what you have said. So far, you know, sis. Heart. Psych meant to say heart, tongue face. And as for fun size, you'll have to prove that to me someday. Tongue face. Caitlin says, LOL, I'm getting all dolled up today. Been a while and I'm feeling lazy. LOL. Caitlin says, I've got some heels too. Nick says, I know, but we will see if you ever get to prove that fun size thing. Hee hee. Other than that whole thing, I'll just keep looking at animal lover posts. Caitlin says, LOL, nice. What's on your mind, Nicholas Paul Curry Godejohn? Nick says, besides you and my SO, these posts I told you about, maybe because I'm trying to find some funny ones to post. Caitlin says, she's gorgeous, by the way. Wink face. Nick says, thanks. Caitlin says, you're welcome. Smile. Nick says, you seem in quite a good mood, which is always a plus. Caitlin says, just chilling like a villain. Nick says, sure. Caitlin says, what? Nick says, LOL. And Caitlin says, I don't know if I can say that on YouTube. Right there. She basically says, eat kitty, cats, hers. Nick says, I'll think about that. Caitlin says, facepalm. Nick says, I could be sexual about it, but nah, not this time. Tongue face. Caitlin says, cannibal. And Caitlin says, LOL. Nick says, well, I don't eat humans. Nice try, though, sis. Caitlin says, you just said you'll think about it. LOL. Nick says, but being a cannibal is way different than that. So nice try, sis. It didn't work this time. Caitlin says, LOL. Okay. I'm starting to wonder if he's cheating. Unsure face. Caitlin says, ugh, whatever. And then Nick says, wow, you are taking quite a while just to answer me, it seems. Caitlin says, what? Caitlin says you're not online. Nick says, interesting, just an error the site must be having. Caitlin says, I don't know. Wow. Nick says, the site at times does this with errors, so it wouldn't surprise me. Caitlin says, I know. And Caitlin says, I'm going for the ready whip. LOL. Nick says, now what are you up to? Caitlin says, LOL headed for the fridge, you? Nick says, but I don't know why you would need to use Ready Whip though. Caitlin says, LOL, yogurt, sliced banana, whip topping. Nick says, that makes more sense now. Caitlin says, LOL, usually when I feel this way, I eat it out of the can. Nick says, okay. However, I am going to change plans here. It is going to be too cold to walk to the library Monday, so I may just walk to it this next week's Wednesday, since the weather is bearable, and usually I shouldn't be walking in weather any colder than 15 degrees. And Monday it is supposed to be 9 degrees with the wind. That will make it feel like it's below zero. Caitlin says, it's just now hit 35. It was 23 this morning. Nick says, well, that is there, but not here. Right now it is 8 degrees out. Caitlin says, but it sounds like a plan. Nick says, what? What I said sounds like a plan? Caitlin says, F that burr, waiting till it's warmer out. Nick says, sis, that is what I just said. I won't be on this Monday. It will be moved to the middle of the week, that Wednesday instead, since it is warmer. Caitlin says, okay. Nick says, I know you still worry about me still at times, sis, so I won't give you a reason to worry if I can make sure I don't. Since, yes, I know you still care about me, or you wouldn't have mentioned me waiting until it was warmer. Caitlin says, true. Nick says, sis, glad you agree with me. I am feeling what is truly there. Caitlin says, I always care and worry about you, bro. Nick says, well, I said that as if I really do feel it. That is why you gave credibility to what I said. Caitlin said, only because it's true. Caitlin says, so how cold was it when you left the house this morning? Nick says, probably somewhere around 4 or 5 degrees, I would say. Nick says, of course, I didn't know at the time, or I would have stayed home. Caitlin says, now you're just trying to cover your ass. Pay more attention to the weather and temperature outside, Nicholas Paul Curry Godejohn. If you were here, you wouldn't like it. Nick says, are you sure about that? Caitlin says, I guess you aren't sure. Caitlin says, yes, I'd be kicking your ass, bro. Nicholas says, no, you wouldn't. I know you wouldn't, because one thing I know is if you hurt me, you're hurting yourself. Caitlin says, you were walking in the cold, and what would you do if you got sick? Nick says, sis, I didn't get sick, and I got rid of my sickness I had towards the beginning of cold season because I did, and I only get it once a year. That tells you that I won't get sick with that. As for the flu, I have mastered getting rid of it, so I'm not worried about the flu. Caitlin says, I am still worried about you regardless of what you think, bro. Accidents do happen too. Then Nick says, well, that is just you being your caring self. I appreciate your concern, sis, but try not to worry about me getting sick again because I won't do it on purpose. If it happens, it will be unexpected. I wouldn't make you worry on purpose. I'm not that mean, sis. Caitlin did a cry face. And she says, damn the mommy instincts, ugh. Nick says, what? Is this have to do with me in any form? I know you used to say you would be protective of me as if I was your own child, but yeah, and Nick says, but I got to get going now, Caitlin. My cousin is coming over. I know I might not be able to beat him there, for I don't want to make you worry or my SO worry. So I'll take my time getting there. And please try and have a good night because I don't want to be thinking that you are worried about me and such, sis. Anyway, I'll say that now since it feels good to see you say it back. Good night, sis. Caitlin says, because now that I'm a mother, I care more and I worry more about people that are part of my life. Caitlin says, okay, take care of yourself and be careful and have a good weekend. Text me or whatever. Good night, bro. Nick says, okay, sounds good. Good night, sis. And they say good night a couple more times. Okay, and then they talk again on the 12th. They left off there on the 7th. Caitlin tells Nick she's suffering cramps. He asks if she's ate. She says no, she got sidetracked watching Dr. McStuffins. Tells him she's on her monthly bullshit. Nick says, I figured I had to know since I made sure you weren't on those cramps because of not eating or drinking something, or yeah, something like that, hun. So he starts in the hun with Caitlin, like him and Gypsy do. Caitlin says, I know, hun, BRB. Nick says, okay. Caitlin says, I'm back. Nick says, that took a surprising amount of time. She tells him she was getting her baby ready for his nap. Caitlin says, so what's new? Nick says, nothing right now, just taking it easy and trying to make sure that my body is fine when I go through the snow today, since, well, it was snowing yet again. Caitlin says, Nicholas Paul Curry Godejohn, what the hell are you doing out in the snow? Nick says, it started to snow just as I started to go to the library. It wasn't that way when I went to the store. Caitlin says, you don't have much meat on your bones. Nick says, what does that have to do with me walking to the library, hun? Caitlin says, meaning you could get cold sooner. Nick says, "Hun, the way I dress, that is impossible. And if anything, you truly know me as a Wisconsin knight. That is, us Wisconsin knights are known for knowing how to dress this time of year, hun. Y'all, please, before I laugh, if we do we have anyone from Wisconsin is being known as a Wisconsin knight, spelled Knight, some kind of cultural thing? Is that if that's just something he came up with in his mind, it is a little funny. Caitlin says, just making sure you're warm enough, hun. Nick says, well, I thank you for your caringness, but I do know how to dress this time of year. However, it's just the walk is the only thing you should worry about me doing too much of, dear. Caitlin says, yeah, I'm worried about that too, sweetheart. Nick says, well, I got to take it easier on my walk when I walk back, though, since I guess my heart was beating too fast for my breathing to keep up. And that is why I was having chest pain. And I know for a fact that is why, hun. Caitlin says, erg, I'm just going to bite my tongue. Nick says, why is that, dear? Caitlin says, because I'm in a bad mood. Nick says, oh, what's bothering you? Caitlin says, just dipshit. Nick says, oh, I hope he isn't up to anything that would worry me with you because I'll get pissed too. Nick says, no answer, I see. Nick says, having connection problems, I see. Nick says, it seems I am going to be ignored. If not, better speak soon. Caitlin says, hold on a sec. Nick says, then Caitlin and then Caitlin says her ex is coming to get her and the baby, even though she says he doesn't want him to. Nick responds with, here we go again. Bullshit round two. Caitlin, it seems you will never have a chance to be protected by me, even though if my vampire half of me came out around him, he would look like nothing to it. But it seems that chance of that happening is too slim. Unfortunately, I wish it wasn't as slim as it is, but it seems to be that way. And you know damn well I wish I could protect you from him, but you are too far away. His vampire side. Oh, cut out that laugh. Ugh. Caitlin says, I've got people that will be around if his bitch ass ever shows his face around here. Sissy bitch ain't got a clue what he's getting himself into. Ha ha ha. Nick says, hun, okay, I just want you to be safe. And it wouldn't take people if you were around me. It would take a person to deal with him. Believe me, he wouldn't want to deal with my other half, hun. And just for context, for anyone who hasn't watched the previous videos where I read their other messages, she knew about his alter ego, Victor, and demanded to talk to Victor previously. I'll link this video again here. And that's why she's not being like, what are you talking about? Okay, so Caitlin says, okay, I know, but the thing is, you're there and I'm here. I know his wink points myself. Wink face. Don't assume I've never thought about using them against him. Tongue face. Nick says, and what do you plan on doing, hun? Obviously, I am the only one you can trust with anything you were to say, so I'm curious. Tell me what you are planning on doing, hun. Caitlin says his knees are screwed up and so is his back. Caitlin says, take his knees out and he falls and possibly another vertebrae. Nick says, hun, Taurans care more about their neck than anything. So you could try to also choke him until he passes out, since, well, that would really freak him out. Just saying this since I know he is the opposite of what a true Taurus is supposed to be. As you know, I am that true Taurus, dear. Okay, I got to Google real quick what Dee Dee Blanchard's astrology sign is. Okay, it looks like she would have been a Virgo. The way you said that made me think about the cut to the back of Dee Dee's neck, and I had to check. Okay. Well, this is getting pretty long, friends, so I'm going to go ahead and cut off and edit here and then finish reading the rest of it in another video. Let me know what y'all think. Do you think Nick actually had a heart problem, or was that a manipulation? If it was a manipulation that he was trying to do to get Caitlin to, be all, oh no, poor Nick, or whatever. Did he learn that from Gypsy? Because they're a year and a half into their relationship at this point. Because they started talking on Christian Dating for Free October 2012, and this is February 2014. So yeah, let me know what you think in the comments, friends, and we will go out with a palate cleanser. Hope everyone's having a good day. Crap, I got thorns in my fingers, friends. We got cactus bugs in there having sex. Look at those.